If you've been anywhere near basketball Twitter, sports TV, or even just scrolling shorts lately, you've probably seen it. Caitlin Clark versus Paige Bueckers. Clips, edits, side-by-side stats, who's better debates. The internet has turned them into the faces of women's basketball, and then immediately tried to turn them against each other. But here's the twist almost nobody pushing that rivalry narrative wants to talk about. Paige Bueckers herself just came out and shut all of that down. No beef, no hate, no I can't stand her. In fact, she says she and Caitlin have been cool for years. So how did we get from breath of fresh air for the WNBA to manufactured feud between two of the best to ever come through the college game? Let's break down what actually happened, how the media ran with it, and what Paige just revealed about their real relationship. When Caitlin Clark hit the WNBA with the Indiana Fever, it changed everything. The league had stars before, but her arrival was different. Ratings spiked, arenas started selling out. People who never watched a full women's game in their lives suddenly knew when the Fever were playing. She was dropping logo threes, breaking records, and instantly becoming one of the most talked about athletes in American sports, period. And it didn't matter if you were a Fever fan or not, you had an opinion on Caitlin Clark. You either loved her game, thought she was overhyped, thought she was carrying the league, or thought she was being targeted, but you were talking about her. That's what leagues dream of when a player comes in: conversation, emotion, attention. Then 2025 hit, and another wave rolled through. Paige Bueckers left UConn and entered the WNBA draft. She lands with the Dallas Wings, and just like that, the league has another massive, marketable name, someone who'd already had her own share of hype and spotlight since high school. If Caitlin was the sharpshooting, record-breaking phenomenon from Iowa, Paige was the smooth, poised, all-around killer from UConn who'd been tagged as next up long before she turned pro. Suddenly, the WNBA wasn't just getting a star, it had two young faces that casual fans recognized before they ever played a professional minute. And that's rare in women's basketball. These weren't quiet arrivals, they were events. That's where things really exploded. Two major talents, both with massive college followings, both easy to market, both capable of carrying highlight reels and headlines on their own. You had people who had never watched a WNBA game now asking when Indiana plays Dallas, not because they cared about either franchise before, but because they wanted to see Clark and Bueckers on the same floor. Naturally, the media did what the media always does. Instead of just celebrating that two generational players had landed in the league at the same time, huge chunks of coverage immediately turned it into a rivalry. Who's better? Who's more clutch? Who's more marketable? Who deserves more hype? You started seeing thumbnails and segment titles that made it sound like Caitlin and Paige couldn't stand each other. And fans added fuel to it too, whether they realized it or not. Every time one of them had a big performance, timelines would fill up with comparisons. Clark would never, Bueckers is way more complete, and so on. Clips of one were used to tear down the other. It became less look how good these two are, and more pick a side and defend it. And in the middle of all that noise, both of them are trying to navigate being young women in a pro league that still has to fight stereotypes just to be respected at the same level as men. That's why what Paige Bueckers said recently is so important. She went on Kylie Kelsey's podcast, Not Gonna Lie, and by the way, if you don't know, Kylie is Jason Kelsey's wife, and that show has quietly become a go-to spot for real, honest athlete conversations, and Paige finally addressed the Caitlin versus Bueckers narrative head-on. She basically said they've known each other since they were young, and that people have been trying to pit them against each other for a long time. But from her perspective, they're cool, they're friends. They both understand exactly how the media works and how easy it is to turn two successful women into opponents for clicks. In other words, the rivalry might be real on the court in terms of competition, but off the court, there's no hate, no secret drama, no behind-the-scenes tension the way people want to imagine. She also talked about something that gets lost in all this noise: Team USA. For Paige, being part of the national team setup is a huge source of pride, and she made it clear that instead of constantly comparing her and Caitlin, fans should be excited about the idea of seeing them play together in a USA jersey. Think about that for a second.
All this time, people have been obsessed with Clark versus Bueckers in the WNBA, and meanwhile, Paige is looking at the bigger picture, the possibility of both of them being on the same roster, representing the United States, and giving the world a backcourt that other countries will have serious problems with. She even pointed out that as a country, fans are going to be proud to say, yeah, we really do have the best of the best, not just one star to rally around, but multiple elite talents all on the same side when it comes to international play. That angle doesn't get clicks the way a fake feud does, but it matters, especially for women's basketball. Because let's be honest, the way women in sports get covered is still not the same as men. You almost never see this level of "you must hate each other" being forced on male players with the same intensity when they come into the league around the same time. They'll get comparisons, sure, but it doesn't instantly turn into "these two can't possibly get along" every time.
With Caitlin Clark and Paige Bueckers, the coverage crossed that line early. It wasn't just competition, it was suggested hostility, and Paige is basically saying that's not real and it's not helpful. Not for them and not for the sport. It doesn't mean they're not competitive. Once the ball goes up, you already know neither one of them is going to care about friendship for 40 minutes. They both want to win. They both want to be great. They both want to be the one people are talking about the next morning. That's normal. That's healthy. That's what makes great basketball. But there's a difference between "I'm trying to beat you" and "I hate you as a person," and Bueckers is drawing that line very clearly. There's also a really interesting layer here in terms of how fans consume women's basketball now. Caitlin Clark brought in a wave of casuals. Paige Bueckers brings in another. A lot of those people are new. They don't know the full history. They didn't grow up watching the WNBA or UConn or Iowa. What they're being fed first is edits, drama clips, this person said that about this person, and so they naturally gravitate toward the soap opera side. What Paige just did on Kylie Kelsey's show was pull back the curtain a bit and remind everyone that these are real people with actual relationships beyond the narratives. Two women who've known each other for years. Two players who can respect each other while still wanting to outplay each other when it counts. The fact that she took the time to make that clear says a lot, especially when she mentioned how long people have been trying to force this rivalry. This didn't just start with the WNBA draft. It goes back to AAU days, high school, college, all the way up. Every time they were mentioned together, someone tried to frame it as one versus the other. Now, none of this means fans should stop debating who they think is better. That's part of sports. You're supposed to argue about who you'd build around, whose game you prefer, who you think shows up more in big moments. The difference is whether that conversation is rooted in respect or in this weird expectation that successful women have to tear each other down. Paige is clearly pushing for the first one. The other thing that her comments highlight is just how big of a moment this is for women's basketball as a whole. The WNBA now has Caitlin Clark with the Indiana Fever, Paige Bueckers with the Dallas Wings, and a long list of established stars who have already been carrying the league. Add in the possibility of both Clark and Bueckers wearing USA across their chests in major international tournaments, and you're looking at a golden era if it's handled right. That's why this "we're friends, we get it, we understand the media" line from Paige is important. It shows that even at a young age, they know the game off the court as well as on it. They understand how narratives are built. They understand how quick people are to reduce them to a headline, and they're choosing to push back on the worst parts of that. At the end of the day, fans are still going to tune in when Indiana plays Dallas. The Clark versus Bueckers on-court matchup will always be must-watch. The WNBA will absolutely market it, and honestly, they should. It's great for business, and it's great for visibility. But now you know there isn't some secret hatred underneath it. The tension is purely competitive. And if things go the way a lot of people expect, those same fans will eventually be watching them share the floor on Team USA, not as rivals, but as teammates, representing the same flag and probably running through international defenses together. So the next time you see a headline trying to make it sound like Caitlin Clark and Paige Bueckers can't stand each other, remember what Paige just said. They've known each other since they were young. They're cool. They're friends. They both understand this media machine. And while everyone else argues about who's better, they're focused on actually playing the game and, when the time comes, making sure the rest of the world knows exactly how strong women's basketball in the United States really is. Let me know in the comments,
Are you more excited to see them go at each other in the WNBA or to potentially play side by side for Team USA? And do you think the media goes too far trying to force rivalries like this in women's sports?